So, Mark, thank you again for taking the time to talk to me about your experience and your visions and your opinions on technologies in neurorehabilitation. I would like to start with the question, how did you come to use technology like the XO, and how did using the XO, especially for the first time, change your life?
Well, look, I come from a sporting background. I was a endurance sports, really. I was a rower. I then went into adventure racing. I did 6 marathons in a week in the Gobi Desert, did the North Pole Marathon, the Everest Marathon, the Dead Sea Ultra, the Zurich Ironman, and then I did a 43-day expedition race to the South Pole. So I have my natural state of being was to get up in the morning, go training, work towards goals. This kind of combination of training as a foundation for general health and performance was quite natural to me. So when I broke my back, having fallen out of a second-story window in 2010, and I went through 16 months in a hospital where it became clear that the rehabilitation process ended at the point where there was no further recovery, and really was perhaps seen through the lens of getting out of the hospital bed into a wheelchair so you could leave the hospital, in stark terms. But I found that challenging in the beginning, and then I realized, the medical professionals at that early stage are in the business of keeping people alive and helping people to deal with that transition to the wheelchair. And I got interested then, having been in the gym every day for this adventure into my wheelchair. I became interested in getting out of the wheelchair. And the natural thing for me was to go back to basics, to train. And I went to California and followed an aggressive physical therapy program in Project Walk in Carlsbad. Now, what was attractive to me, like this sort of sporting approach, was I could go and learn what to do. I could then get a friend, a trainer, my South Pole teammate, trained up like a training camp. And it was the foundation. I knew it wasn't going to cure me, but it was the foundation that I was using, the bits that do work and the bits that don't work.
Yeah.
And really, that was a sort of foundation. Just remember, in 2010, robotics weren't really freely available, or they're still not, but they weren't as available. So we were breaking down the walking movement. And then I read about exobionics. I went to visit them in California. I stood and walked, and it felt like it was an opportunity to put all of the stuff we were doing on the physiotherapy table, put it all together, and walk in an efficient manner. Didn't think it was going to cure me, but being upright, putting weight through my feet, I thought it was going to do something physically good. And I didn't quite realize, if I get to actually answering your question, I didn't quite realize the psychological lift that it would give me, regardless of the studies, regardless of the science, regardless of any impact on the physical. Just being upright. And I remember the first time I strapped into the device and just got up and stood. My dad was with me in San Francisco, and I was able to give him a hug. And then I was able to take a few faltering steps, and very quickly I was able to move quite freely in the device. But it was the psychological impact was major.
Nice. Did you, apart from the psychological effect that my experience for a lot or most of the patient is a very impressive one, seeing them getting motivated to do therapy after being maybe totally passive in that area for a long time. Did you experience any physical changes when you started using the XO more frequently?
Yeah, well, I did, and I think at the beginning the expectation was that maybe 500 steps in a 60-minute period might be the target, and then we got to 1,000 and 2,000 and 3,000 steps an hour. And what I noticed was that for me, the walking in the EXO was important from a hip flexors, from, it doesn't make sense, but sitting down, you feel kind of squashed. Standing up, I felt lengthened out. It helped with my morning visit to the bathroom. No doubt about that. I hope that won't be highlighted and put on social media, but but certainly it helped with that. But it was really a psychological impact and a physical or mechanical loosening out.
So are you doing other therapies apart from the EXO training?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what I've. The danger is that you start to go into everything that you've heard about, but what I've actually done in a tangible way a number of times has been using transcutaneous spinal stimulation. So we moved to LA for 3 months. I walked every day in the EXO, stimulated my spinal cord, and I got great results. Increase in muscle mass, the nerves firing in patterns, not just firing randomly, but firing in patterns that made sense. When I was making an effort to drag my right leg forward, I was doing more, the robot was doing less. We matched it up with the data, so it was having an impact. We did that. We then replicated it a year later back in Dublin, at Trinity College in Dublin. I know there are studies of combining robots and spinal stimulation all over the place. But what was particularly challenging for me was that I had access, or I'd felt what it was like, and then I didn't have access to a device because it hadn't been moved out of the lab into a spin-out company, commercialized and made available. So I was one of the lucky ones having access to it, but hundreds of thousands, millions of people don't have access to it. So these breakthroughs need to get commercialized so that everyone can access them at a reasonable price, or that they can be made available in clinics. Inside studies, outside studies, but we need more access for these technologies that actually have a breakthrough.
Yeah, I think you stated a very important point, that it's not only important to do studies and to do research, but to get devices commercialized and used by patients.
The way I think of it is that we need explorers, well-funded. Few get access to it. We need scientists to do their jobs, and then when we find what's at the fringes, we need to bring it back. We need to make that available to as many people as possible, and the mechanism becomes interesting. Exploration in science must be done in a regulated fashion, controlled, so humans are looked after.
Yeah.
But then we've got to transition it into specialist clinics. I know not, and look, I'm actually talking myself. This sounds like a sales pitch for your organization. It's absolutely not. But we've got to get it out of research, out of just research, locked behind the ethics or the IRB. When we know enough, we need to have partnerships with clinics. We need to have access to technologies where one expensive piece of kit is accessed by the many. And then eventually, hopefully, we can have lots and lots of technologies that are at the later stage of the cycle that people can work with them at home. But we've got to come up with systems and pathways out of the lab into shared centers, clinics, and eventually at home.
So if you think about comparing classical therapy, classical physiotherapy, manual physiotherapy with the technology you have been using and you're still using, could you give us an idea of how you would compare both? Is there advantages and disadvantages in both, or could you describe your experience?
Yeah, well, the first thing is the advantage of physiotherapists is that they have lots and lots of experience, lots of expertise. They can pick up things that you can't necessarily on your own. So the question then becomes, what's the best use of the resources?
Right.
Which also has cost implications. And at a certain point, those cost implications become so great that it doesn't matter how good the therapy is, nobody can access it. So what I found, if I give you a kind of a concrete example, prior to getting my exoskeleton, prior to the developments in the software, which bring in some uncertainty into it, that the robot's not just powering me along 100%, as I said. The motors are reducing as I do more. The reason I can do more is because of the electrical stimulation of the spinal cord. The alternative to that is strapped up in a treadmill with lots of physios moving the legs. And I simply couldn't afford to raise the kind of money that it required, not just for the equipment. I think we could have got the equipment, but I couldn't afford 6 physios at a volume that would allow me to do it in a meaningful way. So I was able to raise the money to get up and walk in an exoskeleton with all of its imperfections, because the physios, can do things and lengthen your stride and shorten it in a great way. I just couldn't afford to do it. So the exoskeleton gave me access with one person to 60 to 90 minutes a day. I was doing at the height of it. I've done over 1.5 million steps with a financial or a cost model that allowed me to access the benefits in a meaningful way. And I think that's the constant battle. Hopefully technology will get better and better and better. Sure. The insight from the physiotherapy will be required. Screening people to begin with, making sure that the walking form is right. And we worked together. You came to visit me in Dublin, shortening my stride, lengthening my stride, leaning back, leaning forward, having the walking motion as good as it possibly can be.
Well, in my opinion, it's very important to combine, like you said, to combine the knowledge of a well-trained physiotherapist with the possibilities of the technology available at the moment. I think that makes a successful rehabilitation process. That's very important.
Yeah, I would 100% agree.
Well, that has also implications on reimbursement from cost payers. Now, that's a very important part.
That that kind of health economics piece needs to be done. I know in very many cases we hear of people standing and walking who have severe neuropathic pain. They stand and they walk and they don't have it in any meaningful way until they stop walking for a while. They need to get back into it. Now the question, let's just assume that is the case and all the studies have been done and it's proven to be the case. For someone like that, not to have neuropathic pain, then not to have to be on so many motivation dampening drugs that keep them in bed, and then they have the opportunity to work and to work in something that's meaningful to them, building up motivation, and so it's a virtuous cycle. That we know that is there. We know that is the case, but of course we can't know until it's the studies have been done, proven, and published in a peer-reviewed article. Journal.
So, if you think into the future, how do you think can or should therapy develop, especially in the neurological therapy area? And what do you think is the potential of data-driven decision-making for therapy?
Well, if I imagine a scenario where the model is not unlike the craze for gyms that appear on practically every street corner in every city around, certainly in Western Europe and the States. Access to good quality interventions at a level that has an impact, where there's social interaction with releasing oxytocin and giving us all those good benefits. So, these hubs, centers, places where people can access technology, they can share technology, and that they have expert input from experienced practitioners. Very important. An element of ongoing daily use throughout the day or at home as well. Very important. And of course, data-driven decision making is critical. The question is, where is the data held? If it's held in university labs locked away that nobody can see, or it's held in academic journals that I understand that some research came out that said, only 7 people read many of the articles, and 3 of those people are the people who wrote the articles. So gathering data, and for that data to be analyzed in a fashion that decisions can then be made to have an impact, that's important. There's too much data being gathered for data's sake, and then nothing's being done with it. Again, this is not revolutionary in society. I myself track my wattage output on my handbike, my heart rate data, my speed, my cadence. I have another strap that tracks my sleep, my heart rate variability. I log all my food, and it all goes together. And my sports coach looks at that and makes decisions about what my training plan is going to be, either to push on and go harder, or to back off to prevent injury. And the challenge, I think, whenever I read any articles that I've been involved in as a subject, is that the focus is necessarily so narrow that we're not actually understanding, well, that person is responding well today, but that's because they've had a month of perfect sleep, excellent nutrition, low stress, and things are going well. And alternatively, the intervention isn't working brilliantly because the person's simply too wiped out, they're too stressed, they're overwhelmed, and so on and so on. So I'm very interested in very broad data sets that are not necessarily being self-reported by the human, because as humans we're terrible at self-reporting. We gather all that, and surely intelligent systems and artificial intelligence will be able to analyze data, huge volumes of data, to make predictions and make adjustments and make help us to understand what to do next. So look, the data is important.
Right. Well, Mark, thank you very much again for taking the time. It's been very good talking to you again. Hopefully we'll see each other personally again quite soon. I'd love
Absolutely.
Trinity and have a training with you. I'll stop recording now.
Cool. Thanks.